Greetings, APWU family. Welcome one and all, and so glad you could join in with me tonight and some of the guests that we're going to have. First, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. The purpose of this live stream is to try to share with you kind of a lay of the land for the coming year. And of course, wish all of you well in these trying times. Postal heroes, one and all. You know, before I get into some details, I was thinking a little while ago that Time Magazine does their Person of the Year every year. And this year they gave it to billionaire Elon Musk, anti-union billionaire Elon Musk, that seems to be more concerned with what's happening in outer space than what's happening here on Earth. And when I heard that, my first thought was, shame on Time Magazine. The Person of the Year should be the essential workers on the front lines in the pandemic, serving the people, whether we're farm workers, truck drivers, firefighters, meat packers, grocery store workers, sanitation workers, transit workers, our wonderful medical personnel, and of course, postal heroes. Just a quick story. I did an interview last year at some time. I can't even remember the outlet, the media outlet. And a reporter, we were remote like this because of COVID. He lived in Brooklyn, New York. And when we got done with the interview, he said, "Mark, I want to tell you a story. We were the epicenter of the pandemic. Ambulances were going by my apartment every 5 minutes. We lost 20,000 people in a short period of time." And he said, "You know something? My mail came to my apartment every day." That reflects the appreciation and the awe of the people of the country and what you do day in and day out. And we're doing it again with these COVID test kits that the administration has rightfully decided to send into everybody's homes. Who better than us, the public postal service, to every address with universal service, to every home, to help with this ongoing public health crisis and this tragic pandemic. And I know all of you have been touched. All of our families have been touched, and our hearts go out to all of you. And my greetings to you tonight are from all our national officers at Postal headquarters. So I want to get into the lay of the land that has, as I see it, this coming year. Not going to take a lot of time, 10, 12 minutes. Then we'll get into your questions. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to also hear from you. It's a way we can share. I haven't been able to travel the country like I would and other officers normally would to see a lot of you in the field at conferences, on workroom floors. So this is a way, and we keep our fingers crossed that the technology will keep us connected for the next hour. We will keep it to an hour, so we obviously won't be able to answer every question, but we're going to try to group them together, answer the questions that most people ask. And we also know that while the purpose of the call is not to delve into the exact details of the new tentative agreement, certainly that's on people's minds, and we will answer some questions that come here that we come on that front. We've had a lot of information through the magazine, the website, the news service bulletins. We've had webinars and so on. So let me get into the coming year, and it's going to be a challenging year, but an exciting year and one full of opportunity. And sort of in chronological order, but not exactly. First upon us, as we're speaking just about, is the ratification process. And again, without getting into details, it's your vote on whether you think this tentative agreement is good for you and your coworkers and your families. It comes with unanimous support of the National Negotiating Committee, a unanimous vote of the Rank and File Bargaining Advisory Committee to put it out to a vote, full support of the National Executive Board. And we stand on the shoulders with this collective bargaining process, and we should never forget this, of our courageous forefathers and foremothers who won in an illegal, nationwide, victorious strike that we call the Great Postal Strike of 1970. That's been bequeathed to us. We carry that torch forward, and we are very pleased and proud that we think we have presented to the members a very solid agreement. Later in the call, I've asked Secretary Treasurer Liz Powell, who's leading the effort around the ratification process, to come on and share a little more details but suffice it to say for now, the ballots will be in the mail shortly, and they're going to have to be back with the Arbitration American Association, who actually runs the election, by February 23rd. But Sister Powell will fill you in a little later in the call in more details. Of course, following the contract, if it's ratified, and we certainly hope it will be, we'll have an implementation period, such as when the new pay rates get in, when go in, when the retroactive checks are cut, and some other provisions that are in the tentative agreement that says, so many days after the ratification, these will become effective. So that will also be taking place, and soon into March and April, very important. So that's one. Two is legislation. We think we're on the cusp, finally, of getting bipartisan legislation, hopefully over the next few weeks, that will fix the pre-funding draconian onerous mandate from 2006. When I say fix it, I mean eliminate it. And do some other things that we think are very fair, like Medicare integration, that will not only save money for the post office, it will save money for future postal workers. It will not affect or force current retirees into any changes, but it will be a change going forward in the future. There's some other good things in the Postal Reform Act, like protection of 6-day delivery. Sisters and brothers, that's not just a letter carrier issue, that's a postal issue. And it affects the service to the people of the country. And we had many, many jobs as well tied into the 6-day and now sometimes 7-day process and operations of the Postal Service. So we will keep you posted at the end of the call. Oh, there it is right now. We're asking you. So at a certain point soon, Legislative Director Judy Beard will be reaching out with her department, and I will too, asking you to call Congress at a certain moment. And so you could sign up now, so we'll know you're ready to do that. You can text reform to 91990, and we'll know you're lined up to take that action. And we'll certainly remind everybody at the end of the call as well. A couple other legislative things, issues that are very important. The Build Back Better, most of you probably read, is legislation that's probably not going to pass in its entirety at this point in time. But there was a very important provision in there for the Postal Service and postal workers. And that was $6 to $7 billion for the electrification of the postal delivery fleet and charging stations to go with it. Very important, not just for the environment, but guess what? There are many companies that have plans for the future and their footprint, what they call their environmental footprint. And if we're not the clean carrier, some of these companies are going to have to go elsewhere. So our job security is also tied into getting some of those issues passed. Also, we remain, as I know so many of you do, concerned about any slowdown in the mail. Started in 2010, 2011. It's continued under PMG Louis DeJoy. We're going to have to try to address those issues legislatively going forward. It's not part of the postal reform bill. Postal reform is a fragile coalition trying to keep everybody together to get it passed. But once it passed, we will be back hard at work on those issues as well and be calling upon all of you. Congress doesn't move us. It's us and our activism that moves Congress. So we're going to have to be very active in 2022 going forward. COVID is still upon us. Who thought 2 years later, after we first signed the COVID MOUs and secured a liberal leave policy from the Postal Service that allowed us to use our leave, collectively, individually, protect ourselves, protect our coworkers, protect our families without fear of any retribution. Here we are 2 years later. The COVID memos are in place till February 11th, as is the liberal leave policy. We will likely extend those again, given what's going on in the country. We are keenly aware as the national leadership at headquarters, and we've done everything in our power to try to make the workplace as safe as possible. But we're keenly aware of a lot of the policies that we've developed with postal management and in concert with the other postal unions. That those messages are not always getting into the field. And we just had a meeting today with postal management about our concerns about inadequate contact tracing, management getting weak on PPEs, on proper cleaning, and so on. Some of it might be COVID fatigue, but brothers and sisters, 2,000 people in the United States, And unfortunately, some of them are postal workers. 2,000 people a day officially are passing away from this terrible disease. So we shouldn't let down our guard. We shouldn't become desensitized. You've all probably heard that the OSHA emergency standards on vaccination have not been upheld by the court, but that doesn't mean we're not fighting tooth and nail to make the workplace as safe as possible. And part of that is being our brothers and sisters keepers, wearing masks, socially distancing. And we certainly encourage people to get vaccinated and get boosted on a voluntary basis. Also coming up soon this year is the Amazon campaign to unionize Bessemer, the big warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama. You might say, well, Mark, why are you raising us on our call, this call with postal workers? That's our industry. Number one, we stand with all workers, whether, and this last year, heading into the fall of last year, heading into this year, we've seen an upsurge of worker militancy from John Deere to Kellogg's to nurses in Massachusetts. And we have a time where more and more people have a favorable view of unions. So we stand with all workers who are trying to rise, because that's the way we all rise. But Amazon is our industry, and it's the big non-union, anti-union entity in our industry, or the biggest. And so we are very, and where we can, we're certainly involved. We want to help organize Amazon. It's going to take a multi-union crusade. This is not a competition on who unionizes the Amazon workers. We actually have three union members now in Alabama who live there and work there, out helping out the RWDSU, which is the union that's helping to organize the workers in Amazon, because they're organizing themselves. We have three folks helping. And if any of you know, and many of you probably do if you think about it, friends, family, and whatever who work in Amazon, talk to them about whether they're interested in getting a voice at work, especially learning the lessons of this pandemic, which workers are. We deserve better. We deserve better, and we're going to fight for better. We have the new plans for organizing. Everybody on this call is a union member. You pay your fair share. It gives us the ability, for instance, to be at the bargaining table. When we negotiated the tentative agreement, you were all there because you're all union members. That's our foundation. And you engaged in union gear days and stickers campaigns and set the tone and the demand right up the line that we deserve, and we expect a good contract. But we got too many people riding our backs. And the first day of spring, if everything goes well, we're planning to spring forward with a nationwide organizing drive. And that's not going to work unless all of you are involved. Talking to these non-members about paying their fair share and how much better it will be, whether it's at the bargaining table, whether it's in the fight for health and safety, whether it's in the important fight to enforce the contracts that we win, to enforce it on the workroom floor and stand with each other. We will all be stronger if more of us are in the union. Don't get discouraged. 80% of us voluntarily know this is the right thing and pay our dues. We got to make sure that other 20% comes on board. I'm trying to read my notes here, so give me one. So, another very important battle. Couldn't read my own writing. Another very important battle is the fight to expand postal services, particularly as it relates to financial services. APWU family, we have got to find ways to serve the people in new creative ways, broader ways. That's what connects us more. That's what helps keep the privatizers at bay, because whatever we're dealing in 2022, last year, 2021, the years before, and the years ahead, the fight to keep this a public postal service is paramount. And the more we do, the better we're going to be connected, and the harder it is going to be for the privatizers to chop us and sell us off for private profit. We have cracked the door open a tiny bit with a test program that's really not usable for the people yet on paycheck cashing. Our plans are that by the end of March or in April, that program will be expanded, it will be enhanced, it will be priced right, and then we can really go out and organize it and make it a success. What we do, whenever we do things like this, we want it to be a success, and then we want to build on it. We eventually want expanded services to be part of what the post office does in every post office, like they do in most post offices all over the world, like the United States Postal Service did when it was the Post Office Department for almost 60 years when we had a postal savings bank. So that's another big project and campaign and activity. And it's a campaign with the people of the country who have demanded that they need these kind of services rather than being stuck in this predatory payday lending, check cashing industry that's just preying on the low-income people of this country, working hard for their money and ripping them off every day. And the post office, with its public aspect, and with all of us trusted postal workers, can be part of the answer there for the people of the country. And we also want to work very hard this year. It's been an ongoing problem for decades. There's no easy answers. But we're going to be putting some new programs into effect to try to deal with the work floor environment that's far too much management hostility, far too much harassment. No worker should have to come to work and face the kind of abuse that too often postal workers do. So we're going to be putting our shoulder to the wheels together at all levels of the organization as we head into the new year. Democracy within the union. We have a national union election. We're rare, proudly so. Most unionized workers don't get to vote directly for their national leadership. They vote at a convention, so it's controlled by the delegates. We have one person, one vote. And from May to October, that will be upon you, and you should be very proud and engaged in that process. We also, as part of our democracy, will be having a national convention this year in National Harbor in Maryland, right near Washington, D.C. We missed our last convention. We have conventions every 2 years. With COVID, we were actually not allowed to gather. And so we certainly got our fingers crossed. We'll all be back together, 2,000 strong. But you don't have to be a delegate to the convention to have a voice at that convention. Your locals discuss, your state meetings discuss resolutions, ideas, things that you can bring directly to the convention through your democratic local process. So think about the kind of things that you would like to see addressed, because the convention is the highest authority of the union and sets the direction and the policies going forward. So we encourage all of you to participate in the democratic life of the union. In the fall, we have, and throughout the summer, I'm sure we have the 2022 congressional elections. It affects us. We're a quasi-government agency. And even if we weren't, what happens in Washington, D.C. still affects us. I joke sometimes with people, and I really do know, but I say I don't know how it works on Capitol Hill. I really do know how it works. It does not work well for working people. It works very well for the corporations and the uber wealthy, but it does not work well for working people. But we do want to pay close attention to make sure, from whatever political party or independent, that we're sending people to Washington, D.C. that support a public postal service, that support unions, that support the public good that we're part of, that support health care for all, and those kind of things that are so important, living wages, those kind of things that are so important for all working people. And it's not, and election time is not just about electing representatives. There are ballot initiatives that are deeply important, such as $15 an hour minimum wage or more, where people can actually vote to make those kind of changes in some of the states. So we're going to be deeply involved. And don't forget, you did a wonderful job in 2020 on vote by mail. Everybody, every postal worker should be proud of what we did, giving access to tens of millions of people, giving access to tens of millions of people to the ballot box in a pandemic. We're going to have vote by mail is going to be critical in 2022 as well to make it a success. You all did it, and we plan to do it again. And that gives me a segue into what I think is maybe the most important issue facing of this year as workers, and that's a defense and expansion of the right to vote. What happened in this last election, and it's shameful, sisters and brothers, is we had this big lie out here promoted by the previous president, but all sorts of people around him, that somehow this election was stolen, that what is actually termed as the most secure election in the history of the United States, and one that the most people ever voted, that somehow was rigged and fraudulent. And guess what? The charge really is, if you listen to it, that was rigged and fraudulent because of election mail, vote by mail, which, by the way, goes back to the Civil War. It's a complete lie. It's a complete lie, and this election is a complete lie based on history. Vote by mail is secure. The state of Oregon has had vote by mail by law for over 20 years, from dog catcher to president. 110, 120 million ballots cast over that time. You know how many instances of so-called fraud they had? 15. It's less than one a year. And that's an individual who voted for their kid who's in college and they shouldn't have done it. That's what kind of fraud they're talking about. So we are at the intersection of defending the cherished right to vote. And what's happened behind this big lie is that there's a new assault on our rights to vote. This is not a partisan issue. This is a working people's issue. So all over the land now, and some have passed in already 18 or 19 states, there's new voter suppression laws. And if you don't think it's having an impact, there was an article the other day that in Texas, half the requests for absentee ballots are now being denied through new voter suppression laws. So don't buy into the big lie. This is the big lie. This is the big lie that leads to authoritarianism. These are the kind of big lies that lead to fascists. These are the kind of big lies that lead to January 6th. And it's in our interest as working people to make sure that it's easy as possible to vote, that working people have the best access to the polls, so it's not just the wealthier and the more well-to-do deciding what's best for us. So this is our issue of our time. And if we don't fix it, and unfortunately the Senate did not get this passed last week, but that doesn't mean we as postal workers and union people and the APWU and the labor movement and the civil rights movement and all sorts of movements of people around this country can let up. We can't let up. It's that fundamental and it's that important to all of us. So we have a lot of things happening, a lot of big tasks, but there's nothing better than fighting on the side for and with workers for more power, for more say, and for more justice. So with that, I think I probably went over the time I had envisioned. So I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to ask Stephen DiMatteo, my executive assistant, to start sharing some of the questions, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks very much, President Dimondstein, and good evening, afternoon, sisters and brothers. We got lots of questions in advance of the show, but we also encourage you to drop your questions in the comment section. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, you can drop a question right there in the chat, and we will try to get to as many as we can. We're going to start, President Dimondstein, with a question we got in advance of the show. It comes from Catherine Hiley. She wants to know if we would have been more successful in getting a raise that keeps up with inflation if we had gone to arbitration. What say you?
Catherine, thanks for the good question, and thanks for joining in. So I think it's very important when we look at the tentative agreement, before I answer the specific question about arbitration, to fully think about the wage package. Sometimes we just look at the annual wage increase, but the wage package that we have as postal workers is threefold. It's the percentage increase, which in the tentative agreement is 1.3 for each year over the next 3 years. But it's also our cost of living allowance. And the cost of living allowance is our hedge in dealing with inflation. And the third piece of it that doesn't affect everybody, but about half our workforce, is our step increases. Our step increases are intact, untouched. We have less distance between our steps than the other postal unions. We're the only postal union that has full COLA. And so when you add it all together, and I'll give you two quick examples, and later on in the show, I'm going to ask Van Zimmerman, our industrial relations director, to also jump in. But here's two quick examples. Last year, 2021, our COLA increase was $1.14 an hour for career employees. The PSEs do not get COLA, unfortunately. We tried, we didn't get there this time. But for those who do, $1.14 an hour. Now, our raise that will be retroactive if the contract is ratified is going to be approximately 40 cents an hour, retroactive to November of 2021. I say approximately because it's different for the different levels of pay, but it's close to 39 or 40 cents on the average. Add those together, and it's over $1.50 an hour last year. That's over $3,000 a year for full-time career workers. Not just in 2021, but it's 3,000 more this year, next year, 3,000. It carries forward. Now, moving to 2022, our next COLA, which we still have 1 month to be figured, so it's not an exact science right now, appears that it's going to be another 50 cents an hour. That's $1,000 a year. And that's without the next September COLA. And then we have the 2022 November pay raise on top of that. So it's very important when we think about our pay raises and how to deal with inflation that we really look at the whole package. And Vance will get into that, I think, a little more. But let me answer the question about arbitration. We're much better off if we can get a principled agreement to have it voluntary and for you to have a say. Arbitration is high risk. So for instance, we can go back to 1994. Post office was doing well. Mail was increasing. Their finances were pretty good at the time. It's a 4-year contract. The pay raise was by an arbitrator, 0, 1.2, 0, 1.2, and we lost 2 COLAs. Imagine if we would lose this next COLA. And if we go to arbitration, not only would we not get any more in a pay raise, in our view, we would put at risk our full COLA formula. And as I said, we're the only union that has that. So when you have 3 other postal unions that have done something different, an arbitrator might look at that and say, well, the APW's got to go that way also. We also addressed a lot of work rules, a lot of long-term goals that if we went into arbitration, an arbitrator probably wouldn't even touch because they're largely focused on the economic package. So overall, we think we got, when you look at the whole pay package, good pay packages, great job security, the no layoff protection is fully protected, not only for those who have 6 years, but those who are already on the rolls that don't have 6 years for the life of the contract, who are career. We have a 50-mile limit on excessing for career employees. These are all great job security benefits that are all being carried over into this new contract. So the answer to the question is, in our view, is we've done very well in relation to dealing with inflation. Obviously, inflation's a problem out there. And we did it without the risk of leaving our decision to one person instead of to 160,000 members and your national negotiating team that really did a wonderful job working together, hashing out our differences because we're going to have them, and then moving forward as a one. Thank you, Steve. Is there another question? Do we have technical difficulties?
Well, we do. I muted myself, but that's been resolved. So here we go. The second question comes from Sienna Sasser. She wants to know, what are the plans for PTFs in this contract? She noted that she previously had to drive all over just to get a full week's work.
Well, you know, I had asked Brother Van Zimmerman, our industrial relations director, who was the chief spokesperson for us at the bargaining table. Vance, are you there? Can we bring you in to take a shot at that good question?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to get to you and answer some questions. Yeah, I'll just sort of run down some of the increased benefits that we got for the PTFs. The first is, prior to this contract and for the last 40 plus years, the only guarantee a PTF had was 2 hours of pay period. We certainly have been trying for contract after contract to get that corrected. We did make a major move in the right directions, and we'll fight for more, but it's a 24-hour pay period guarantee. We also got more of every time you come into work, you got a 4-hour guarantee. That affects a lot of PTFs. Now, after 1 year of service, you're going to get advanced 40 hours of annual leave. You've got a 1 day off guarantee with a notification of prior to. We got a conversion opportunity, a one-time PTF conversion opportunity. Mark mentioned about COLA and the raise, and the current raise is approximately 40 cents to 1.3, except when you get to PTFs. That 1.3 in PTFs is going to be about 44 cents. And the reason for that is that you get compensated the holidays there. So the 1.3 for a career employee is going to be 40 cents. And for the PTF, it's going to be 44 cents. We got one additional holiday. So what does that mean in the life of a part-time flexible? Effective January 1st, 2022, the rate of pay for PTFs go up an additional 8 hours across the time period of the year. So there will be retroactive pay of that 8 hours for the hours you work. There will, again, a few things that the PTFs have that like PSEs don't, as Mark mentioned, is cost of living, which is huge. You got access to the consumer-driven plan now for the APWU at 95% of the salary is paid. So there's a very long list besides what the other career employees have, those benefits of retirement and things like that I could continue to go into. But with that, I, if it's all right, Mark, I'd like to segment just a little bit
Sure.
back to what you said about the arbitration. For one, it's important to understand when we go to arbitration, we're actually compared to the private sector in something called the Employment Cost Index. All right. Our COLA, what the ECI, which the arbitrator by law is required to look at versus the private sector. And as you look at that for 2021, which is when our first general increase was, our COLAs had already exceeded the ECI for 2021. And again, just some numbers to put out there. And as you know, Mark laid out that there's basically 3 legs to our raises. A level 4 JJ in this contract, from the beginning of the contract to the end of the contract, is projected that they'll be making 27% more at the end of this contract, about $11,000 more than the start of this contract. A 6FF will be making about $9,800 more, or a 21% increase. So, and those numbers are for the life of the agreement. We're not talking about that $14 raise that Mark already said, that $2,400 we got in 2021. So you add that to it from the beginning of 2021 to the end of this contract, we're looking at the majority of our members, because now the majority of our members are pushing in this step progression. They're going to be looking at a $13,500 raise. That we would not have fared well as an interest arbitration, as the larger inflation is, and that's what COLA is, the more fact that the APWU is one of the few unions in the country that has full COLA, and certainly the only union in the Postal Service that has full COLA, just gets exaggerated, because the other unions tend to, if you start out and you're a junior employee, you're getting 60% of COLA. So I am very proud of what we've been able to negotiate. That's one of the things we want to point out. Often you say, well, you know, these teachers got a 4% raise. Well, 4 times 3 is 12%. As you can pick out any number of the individuals that are there. We're getting more than that based on this formula. And so I'm a numbers guy. I can talk numbers all day, but I can tell you we've studied with some of the top economists. And if I can just take one more moment to vary off a little bit. You know, this isn't me and Mark and Liz sitting around in a corner thing. What do you think the wages should be, et cetera? We actually, two of the 3 economists we used have been named as the smartest economists in the world. So they have they're honored for the cause, because they recognize what great workers we are and how important the APWU is that they work for us. So with that, even their calculations was exactly this. I think they used, quite honestly, was impressed with what we were able to do in these negotiations. And they were the ones that would, if we had to go to interest arbitration, they would be the ones that would be testifying about the private sector and the law. So I won't go on for the remainder of the 26 minutes, which I could, about the economics and why it's a great thing. With that, I'll stop answering that question.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vance. Hey, Stephen, that's a very good segue, since Vance was talking a little deeper about the contract, to maybe bring in Secretary Treasurer Liz Powell to talk about the ratification process in some detail, because that's very important. And we want a really good turnout, APWU family, because that builds our unity and it builds our strength. Liz, are you there?
I'm here.
All right.
Good evening, APWU family, and thanks for joining in with us. As President Dimondstein explained earlier, in the next few days, you will be receiving a contract ratification packet, each and every member to each and every member's household, and we are encouraging you to cast your vote and make sure that your voices are heard. In that packet will be a tentative agreement. You can read it in a highlight summary page, a letter from the president, and a letter from the rank and file. And most importantly, a simple ballot where you will vote yes or no. The important thing about the ballot is once you receive it, fill it out, return it to make sure that it is returned and received by AAA no later than 9 a.m. on February the 23rd. On February the 23rd, we will also be starting the count of the ballots. And in a special organizing drive, as we have done in the past, we will also be sending that same packet to our non-members. The only difference will be an 1187 will be enclosed in theirs, giving them the right to cast a vote only if they join the American Postal Workers Union, so that they can have their voices heard. We're also encouraging our locals to do everything that they can to mobilize the members to vote and to cast their vote in a hurry, and not in a hurry, but in a timely manner. And National Union will be offering incentives for those locals who gain over 50% of the membership vote. We want you to do 100%. You know that's what we're looking for. For every local that does 100%, and if they do 100% in their local, we will reward each and every one the same incentive. So get those ballots back. Make sure they're received by AAA no later than February the 23rd, 9 a.m. in order to be counted. Make sure you read the summary. Make sure you read the tentative agreement. The entire tentative agreement will be enclosed in a special booklet. You're going to be looking for a 9.5 by 11 envelope, so you won't be able to miss it. It's clearly marked. In the meantime, we thank you for your leadership. We thank you for your membership. We thank you for participation. And we can show the world that we're union strong all day long, and the fight for our future starts today. Stay safe and be well.
Thanks so much, Liz. I saw one question come across the screen that, when is it going to be effective? Will people have to vote? The ballots have to be counted. I believe they're going to be counted the 23rd and 24th of February. And then once it's ratified, the Postmaster General and myself on our side, representing all of you, will sign it. And as soon as it's signed, it's in full force and effect. And then we'll have to deal with the back pay issues and when that comes in, because there will be retroactive pay, at least on the November 2021 pay raise.
Correct.
Stephen, any more questions?
You know what? We're getting a lot of them. Let's go to one that came from Maria. She changing gears a little bit, not necessarily directly related to the contract, but talking about the situation with COVID. She says, we're currently required to use our own leave for COVID-19 related absences. Is there anything in the works to address the continuing effects of the COVID pandemic?
So I'll take a start, and Brother Zimmerman has also, as the IRD leads the health and safety efforts headquarters, and may want to briefly jump in as well. Another very good question. Look, it depends on the circumstances. Administrative leave should certainly be paid under some circumstances. If you think you should be getting administrative leave and are not, then you should see your local union reps. We also want people to be keenly aware. We've done a lot of education in the magazine, on the website, that OWCP claims can be filed for COVID-related absences depending on what they are. So that's something we also want people to look very seriously at. And if you can get continuation of pay, and the rules by the Department of Labor have been somewhat relaxed to deal with the COVID pandemic, then if you have the continuation of pay, then you're not using your own leave. Now, again, it depends on the circumstances about the administrative leave versus your own leave. There's a decision tree. We're working with Postal Management at our level to try to make it stronger, try to make it better. Vance, I see you're back on. You may want to follow up on that and
Sure.
jump.
As usual, Mark, you gave the right answer, and I'll just give a little bit more detail to that answer, but it's very sage advice. So if under management's, let me back up for a second. EFEL, the legislative department, the APWU, and the DIR department, and the president and the secretary treasurer all work very hard to push Congress to pass EFEL. And our workers had EFEL for a period of time. That law has expired now. It expired at the end of September. But a very important part of that law that a lot of you don't know is the part about the OWCP. Prior to the language in there, it was your burden to show that you got COVID at work and you didn't get it at the grocery store, you didn't get it at the gas station, you didn't get it picking your kids up from school, you didn't get it from your husband or wife. But that law said that as postal workers, there was an assumption that if you got COVID, that you got it at work. So if you get COVID, you should be filing, in my opinion, it's your choice, but you should be filing an OWCP claim and pursuing that. It does two things. One, will get you so you don't have to use your annual leave and sick leave once it's approved and you fill all out the paperwork. But two, unfortunately, the long-term effects of this disease is unknown. To some, it may cause problems down the road, and then you're protected. So under those two scenarios, one, you may have to, it's not quite as easy as EFEL, but we got that language that's protecting us going forward, and we can use the OWCP. If you're first learning of this OWCP caveat that me and Mark talked about, then you also can go back in the law. You can go retroactive all the way back to when COVID started. If you want to, you can get on. I know going across here at one point, actually, it's going across now. It's the website and coronavirus. If you get on there, you're going to find one of the documents that actually cite the law. Me and Mark met again today with the Postal Service, making sure that we need to get out that message and pushing them to get out that message. And putting pressure on management to understand their responsibilities. So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Vance. Stephen, anything else?
So we got lots of questions related to COVID. We got one from Gary Maioni, and I saw Jennifer had one as well. Folks want to know about COVID pay, hazard pay. Does the union have a view on this?
Yes, the union does have a view on this. We have supported hazard pay in the legislative arena. It was in some of the drafts of the early relief bills, the CARES Act, the rescue plan. It did not make it into final law. And we supported it strongly. On the question that the post office doesn't have the money to pay hazard pay. We needed Congress to step up for all workers, and certainly all workers in the federal sector, to pay the hazard pay. Our main emphasis has been on making sure when we come to work, with or without hazard pay, that the workplace is as safe as possible in this trying time. So we were very focused on getting the barriers up in the retail side, getting new cleaning protocols, new cleaning chemicals, social distancing, contact tracing, the right kind of face masks, PPEs across the board, and the liberal leave policy that enabled people to protect themselves. So our first and foremost effort has been to have the safest possible workplace. We don't want people making more money without the safety provisions. So the safety provisions come first. And then the hazard pay had to have come from Congress. Congress did not pass that as part of their COVID relief efforts. They should have, in our opinion. We were very active, as the other postal unions were, and the federal unions were as well. So that's where it's at. And we'll certainly, if it comes up again and this pandemic keeps going as it seems to, this is going to be on the order of the day as we deal on Capitol Hill as well. Thanks, Stephen.
Mark, and I know Vance wanted to jump in on the hazard pay question as well, if you're still there, brother.
All right. Thank you. I just want to reemphasize something that Mark said, or I've heard several times, and I probably in the chat room here, is, why didn't we demand that an arbitrator give us hazard pay, et cetera? An arbitrator would not have had the authority to give us hazard pay. Is not something we can gain in the contract negotiations, because us being a quasi-federal employee and the way the law is written in the Postal Service since 1971, it would have required that change to Congress. So it's not that, we should have held out for that. We don't have the right to legally strike. Obviously, our forefathers and foremothers showed we had the right to illegally strike. But without an illegal action of a strike, there's no way that it is possible to negotiate hazard pay. As Mark says, we strongly support legislation doing that, but that's the only avenue we have to get that.
All right. Thanks, Vance.
Thanks.
Stephen.
Sure. The next question, turning pages just again, once more, it comes from Carol Sumpf. She's referring to the service standard changes we saw come into effect in October. She wants to know if the Postal Regulatory Commission has upheld the service cuts, can they be reversed?
Well, the Postal Regulatory Commission did uphold the service cuts. And if they're going to be reversed, they're going to have to be reversed by a strong movement of the people of the country, moving Congress to act. After we have postal reform legislation done, hopefully in the next 2 to 4 weeks, in the appropriations process, we've tried before, we will continue to try to restore the kind of service standards that the people of the country are promised under the law. Postal Reorganization Act says prompt, reliable, and efficient services. Prompt means speedy. And when they started the severe slowdowns in 2010, 2011, closing plants, eliminating overnight delivery through the whole country, that diminished services. It drove people away from the Postal Service. It reduced revenue, and it jeopardized all of us. And in the long run, it jeopardizes this wonderful public institution that belongs to the people of the country. So yes, there are ways, but we're going to have to keep fighting. We're going to have to keep pushing. And we certainly, we for instance, in the PRC process, we led in generating with our community allies 130,000 commentaries, unheard of. The most that there ever were before was something like 9,000, 130,000. The PRC, unfortunately, only has advisory authority. The PRC raised some of the same concerns we had, but the Postal Service and the current administration and the Postal Service on this issue ignored the PRC and went ahead with the some of the service cuts that they put into place. So we're going to have to keep pushing. We're going to have to keep organizing, and we're going to have to keep winning if we organize right.
Here's another question about organizing. It comes from Kelly Farlow. She's a TTO in Seattle. She says, I see many contract drivers hauling mail. That's work MVS membership could be doing. What can we do about that?
Well, that's an interesting question and another good question. And all of the questions have been very good. Look, a lot of the mail haul has been on the private side for many, many years. Much of it is long haul from Seattle to Philadelphia. So what our approach with those group of workers is to organize them. And we do represent a number of drivers in the private sector who haul mail for the United States Postal Service. That's the way to go because it uplifts all our standards. Now, if there are local routes that we think we should be doing, I would encourage you to get to your local MVS directors, your local leadership. There are things sometimes that we can dig our teeth into on grievances and try to win that work back. And so it does depend on the often on the type of work. But to us, workers are workers are workers. And if you got truck drivers hauling mail, that's our industry. And we're an industrial union. We take claim over all workers, so-called claim. We claim we have jurisdiction over all workers in the industry. So let's uplift all of us by helping to organize. And where it's really encroached on our work, and we have a basis for getting that work back with some of the MVS job memos in the back of the contract. There's even language there about getting pieces of what the subcontractors are doing back. That's where we have to dig our teeth in on a case-by-case basis on that front. So we actually do want to do both. We want to bring the work back where we can, and where we can, we want to organize them and make them proud members of the APW and build our power as postal workers, whether we're postal workers working for the United States Postal Service directly or indirectly.
Great. The next question, we're going back to the PTF issue again, President Dimondstein. Bill Walker wrote in the chat on Facebook, on the PTF 4-hour guarantee, is there a provision or verbiage on breaks? If I work 6 to 10 and don't come back until 2 a.m., am I guaranteed another 4 hours?
I'm going to ask Vance to answer that if he's still here. There you are. And
Sure.
I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty
I'm
details.
going to make. All right. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I believe I can answer really fast. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So the short answer is yes. I'm assuming that you're talking about 6 and 10 in the evening and coming back at 2 a.m. But yes, the language in the contract that will actually be written is, if you look at the previous contract in Article 8.8, it said that PTS will have a 4-hour guarantee and 200 work year offices, or 125 work year officers and above. That has been deleted. And now it says that all PTFs have that guarantee. There's language in the JChem that explains that. So without getting a much more contractual explanation, the answer is yes. When you come back for that second time, you're entitled to it.
Great. Thanks, Vance.
Great. Thanks very much, gents. The next question comes from Diana Stanfield. She is curious about whether or not there are any plans for plant closures or any other facility closures coming this year, and what can we do to fight back against closures in post offices?
Another very good question. Management does have some plans to finish what they call phase 2 of the plant closing and consolidations. And they started with something like 80. Now, the plant closing and consolidations has been a debacle for the post office. And they started in 2010, 2011, 2012, in that period under PMG Donahoe. But what it did, one of the reasons, in my view, that the postal system in the holiday season of 2020 virtually collapsed is they didn't have the space to put the packages, and e-commerce had exploded in general and exploded even more in the pandemic. So it has slowed down mail. It's taken out needed space. And so they started with some 80 plants. We have now negotiated it down to maybe 18 or 19. And in those 18 or 19, there are some efforts to not close, but to repurpose, in a sense, maybe taking out a piece of equipment that might sort letters and replace it with a piece of equipment that will sort packages, let's say. So what we can do about it where it's happening is build the fight back at the local level, take it to the community, take it to the press, contact us if you have any ideas. But we've made our position crystal clear. And in fact, if we can get Congress to act on service standards and restore at some point overnight delivery, that's another way you keep plants open and keep them from consolidating, and also actually have to reopen some of the plants. In fact, recently, it hasn't happened yet, but management's on the record with us that they're planning to reopen 7 or 8 plants that have been closed in 2012 and 2013. So it's bad, and then there's some good within the bad. So we're just going to have to keep pressing, because anytime they take too much space out, anytime they take too much processing out that's closer to the customers, mail slows down, the customers and the people of the country pay a price, and the workers pay a price too in terms of our jobs and our job security.
Great. Thanks very much. I know you mentioned this off the top, President Dimondstein, but we're getting a lot more comments in the chat. Maybe some folks that hopped on a little bit late. Can you just tell folks about PSE conversions in this new tentative agreement? If you can
Okay.
touch on that again.
So that was so one of the things we're proud of in this agreement is, look, we have no magic wands. We never get everything we want. We never get everything we need, but we're going to take progress where we can and then build on it in the future. For instance, Vance earlier talked about the 4-hour work guarantee for PTFs. We couldn't get that for PSEs. We wanted to in the smaller offices, but we gained where we could, and we're going to build on that in the future. One of the huge gains of this contract, because it deals with the structure of the workforce and the divisive multi-tiered system that was put into place in a concessionary agreement in 2010. And so what we have in this contract now is in level 20 and above. We were not able to get it in the 4-hour post-plan offices. We wanted it, we couldn't get it, but we're going to build on it in the future. In level 20 and above post offices, PSEs, if they have relative standing of 24 months, that means you're working in the same facility, not switching facilities and starting your relative standing, which is the seniority principle for PSEs. After 24 months, you have to be converted to career. It's a wonderful gain, wonderful gain. And it doesn't mean you have to wait 24 months because we still have what's called the residual vacancy memo in place. So if I'm in your facility and I retire, that job gets posted, it washes down, it becomes what's called a residual vacancy. I may be there 8 months and get converted. So you don't have to wait the 2 years, but the 2 years is a backstop. And different than what the letter carrier is able to achieve, and I'm not diminishing what they achieved because it helped us achieve ours. But their conversion was to a PTF position after 2 years for the CCAs. Ours is to a full-time flexible position. So the work hours are guaranteed. It's going to be better with the scheduling. So it's really a great accomplishment. And it doesn't totally eliminate this third tier of the non-career workforce, which I and a lot of union folks completely oppose, but it's here and we got to rebuild and make the best of what we were dealt with in 2010, right? It doesn't do away with it, but it really changes the dynamics where everybody in level 20 and above know that if they're here for 2 years and don't get converted before that, they will have a career postal job with all the career protections, all the career pay and benefits, and it's just a wonderful accomplishment. And it'll help build the unity of the workforce.
Great. Thanks very much, President Dimondstein. We are coming up to the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to ask you two things. One, if you could remind folks about the ratification process. I know that's on a lot of people's mind. Then you also asked me to ask you for our New Year's resolutions for trade unionists in 2022.
Okay. Boy, that New Year's, I'll call it New Year commitments because I know we all make resolutions and heck, most of us can't keep them anyway, right? So we'll call it the New Year commitments. So the first commitment I'll say ties into your other question, the ratification process. Commit to voting, commit to talking to your coworkers about the new tentative agreement, why it's important to vote yes, and why it's important to vote and show our strength as a union family, even where we may have different opinions within that family. So the ballots are basically going in the mail, as Secretary Treasurer Powell said, this end of this week and this weekend. They have to be back with the American Arbitration Association, 9 a.m., February 23rd. If they're not there, then it's not going to count. Okay, so take your time to think about it, but make sure you vote with enough time to that. It's not sufficient to just put it in the mail by 9 a.m. the 23rd. It has to be received at the address that will be on the outside of your ballot envelope. In terms of other commitments, we got a lot of choices, but maybe we can do them all. Sign up a non-member. Don't let them ride your back. Many of you, third commitment, many of you are involved in the union. You're active members, you got on this call. If you're already coming to union meetings, great. If you're not coming to union meetings, start. But when you're coming, bring some co-workers with you so that their voice is heard and we build our power. And when the union puts out the call for the legislative call on postal reform, join in, spread the word. We had one day in front of calling senators in 2020, we had 25,000 members and friends calling the Senate in one day. That is a powerful voice. And my last appeal on a commitment for 2022 is stand with workers wherever they're in struggle for a better life. And part of that is standing with each other, united, black and white, Latino, old, young. That voting rights have to be protected and expanded and be involved in that core, very important issue. So I gave you a whole list, or you can take choices amongst that list. But my New Year's message again is Happy New Year. Even in these difficult times, it's going to be a year of struggle, but it's a year of great opportunity. And I look forward to working with all the members, all of you in this call and beyond, because the union slogan is very true. In our unity lies our strength. So carry on, everybody. Thanks again for joining. Thank you, Sister Paul and Brother Zimmerman for coming in and sharing with the members in the field tonight. Be safe, be well, solidarity forever.